It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here. We're going to talk about something that powers everything from Bitcoin to Tor to Amazon. It's called distributed hash tables. Get your propeller hats on. This is going to be a doozy. Security Now is next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Audio bandwidth for Security Now is provided by the new Winamp for Android, featuring wireless sync and one-click iTunes import. Now with free daily music downloads and full-length CD listening parties. Download it for free at winamp.com/Android. Video bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. It's time for Security Now with Steve Gibson. Episode 398, recorded April 3rd, 2013. Distributed hash tables. Security Now is brought to you by Rackspace, the open cloud company. At Rackspace, build what you want, where you want, and how you want, all backed by their world-renowned fanatical support. Try it today. Download the open cloud at rackspace.com/open. And by Audible.com. To download a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/securitynow. And to kick off the new release of Dimension of Miracles, Audible is sending a lucky winner to Comic-Con. Enter at audible.com/sweepstakes. It's time for Security Now, the show that protects you, your privacy, your loved ones, your money, your Bitcoin, whatever you got online. And here he is, the king of all, the explainer-in-chief, Mr. Steve Gibson of grc.com. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Leo. Great to be with you again, as every week.
You know, I mentioned Bitcoin because it's been really in the news of late. They exceeded $1 billion billion US dollars in value. Although that says more about how inflated the Bitcoin has become as opposed to the actual value of it or the amount of Bitcoin in circulation.
Well, be careful of the use of the word inflated. It's the value of the Bitcoin, and because inflation implies a judgment and it's a relative term.
Of course.
We know that the value of the Bitcoins is going to go up over time because they've succeeded.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It has to happen.
But there's more being made all the time.
But always less more. So already the curve is...
Less than the demand, you're saying.
Already the curve is flattening. Actually, technically, the curve has always been flattening.
Oh, I see
the
what you're
rate of
saying,
production has always been decreasing.
Right.
And it stops in 2040, and there will never be any more.
2140.
Is it 2140?
2140.
Oh, okay. Well, we got a ways to go.
Unless the New Yorker got it wrong. And the reason I brought this up, there's an excellent article. There are two very good articles. There's one at medium.com by the financial blogger for Reuters that's kind of more about current events. And then there's a very good summary article in this week's New Yorker about Bitcoin. And more than anything, that tells me Bitcoin's real. If the New Yorker is writing about Bitcoin in a long-form article, it's very interesting. And you know, we've talked about it. In fact, this is the only show, I think, where you'll really hear a deep discussion of the math involved, why the crypto and the math works in Bitcoin.
Well, and some of the articles that have been written have not been as skillfully assembled, and they've talked about, oh, well, why would you trust a digital currency that just can be inflated? It's like, okay, this can't be. I mean, you can't. Governments can print money. There is an absolute fixed trajectory on the rate at which Bitcoins will be created, and that's set in stone. That can't change. And the only thing that makes this feasible is that because it's digital, you can have an incredibly small fraction of a Bitcoin in a transaction. So, you know, it'd be like if you could actually never have any more money made, yet we were continuing to create value which we wish to exchange with money, then pennies would become valuable again because they would have to be. Now, you know, and there you would see inflation driven by the fact that the money supply is fixed rather than it being, you know, as it is with governmental.
You can always print more paper money, but in the year 2140, approximately, there'll be 21 million Bitcoins, and that's all there will ever be.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of cool.
Right.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, well, I think it's very neat from a technical standpoint, and the fact that it has happened. I mean, this is now. I mean, you're right. The last week of press had one thing it's done is it's raised the price of the Bitcoin above $100.
Well, that was what was interesting about the New Yorker article. She supposed, and there's some evidence to believe, that it was Spaniards who had lost confidence in the euro. Because of the Cypriot crisis and so forth, that had started buying Bitcoin in great numbers and had driven the price up. And it's now, believe it or not, it's been going up a lot, $137. So your 50 Bitcoins, you're a rich man, Steve Gibb. You hold on to these. But then there was the heist of $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. Now it would be worth considerably more.
Well, and this is what we cover in the podcast. We cover mistakes.
Right.
Because when you're dealing in a world of cyber, you make mistakes in cyber technology in the same way that you make mistakes if you don't have a good lock on your bank vault.
And now we presume the mistakes are being corrected, so this kind of heist won't happen again, I guess.
Yeah, and when there were
it's not that there aren't plenty of heists of cash, by the way.
Right. When there were very few exchanges of Bitcoin, then the probability of it being a large event and one of very few exchanges was greater.
Right.
As we get thousands of Bitcoin exchanges, each exchange will be smaller. And so even if one completely got compromised, well, it's like, okay, well, they made a mistake. They're paying the Bitcoin price.
Right. The iron price. It's fascinating, but I leave that for you to investigate in a previous episode. If you go to Security Now at grc.com or twit.tv/SN, you can listen to our entire episode where Steve really does explain in a beautiful way the ins and outs of Bitcoin. And I think that's probably going to be for a long time anyway, the canonical a description of Bitcoin by a third party. It's episode 287, Bitcoin cryptocurrency. And then I did enjoy, there's a good Wired article, there's a good, as I mentioned, Medium.com has an article today, and the New Yorker has an article. And if you want to know more, those are kind of the layperson's discussion.
Yeah, I see no reason why currency would be exempted from the phenomenon of the internet and everything else that the internet is as it's becoming more pervasive, more and more of the real world is moving there. I mean, many people do their banking online now. And so why not have a coinage? It's absolutely reasonable. And the good news is we didn't have several really bad ones first. It would have been bad if several currencies had not been well engineered, came out and stumbled because they were badly put together. In that podcast you cite, Leo, you can hear me being excited because during the prior week in preparing for it, I taught myself what the technology was, and I came away saying, oh my goodness, they did this right. This is so cool. And so, so here, very much in the same way that there wasn't an Internet 1 that couldn't grow, and now we have Internet 2. The original Internet is the same one we're using today. It has turned out to scale brilliantly because the foundation of it was so good. And of course, we spent many podcasts in the past talking about that, explaining exactly why it has managed to scale the way it has. Similarly, the Bitcoin is the currency. There will always be other wannabes, like there's already Litecoin we talked about last week, but this one has made it. And
it's possible for there to be multiple choices, or no?
Sure.
I mean, there's multiple national governmental currencies.
Yes, exactly. And there are people who say, "Oh, I don't trust the dollar anymore. I'm moving mine over on into the into the mark or the yen or the whatever." So. Yeah,
I think I should set up. We have a dollar donation system from PayPal. I think I should set up a Bitcoin donation system. Why not?
I think that absolutely makes sense. The EFF had that for a while, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and they liked having it because they liked the concept, but they took it down with an explanation that they felt, due to the level of their influence, they were endorsing Bitcoinage, and that made them feel a little uncomfortable.
Right.
My guess is if they still had it today, they would probably not take it down. I doubt they'll put it back up, but now with the recent decision by the Treasury Department saying, yes, this is legal, folks, it's one of the things that really, I think that was the catalyst for what we've seen in the last month.
Yes. It also established kind of a standard. Some don't like the idea of any governmental regulation, but at least it kind of said, no, we're going to treat these as a certain kind of entity. This is the real deal. And by doing that, I think it did totally validate Bitcoin. Totally validate it. Well, but this is not a show about Bitcoin, and I've derailed you.
Well, this is what we've been talking about is a distributed currency. And today's podcast is about the technology of distributed databases. And it's unfortunate that the way of indexing the database has become the way they are known, because the way you index them is through what's called a hash. And so the technology for finding the data in the cloud is called a distributed hash table. So today's topic for the podcast is distributed hash tables, but that's a lot less dry than it sounds because this is actually, it's the fundamental solution which has been worked out for how you distribute a database on the internet in a way that is robust, meaning that it's reliable and available, and it is tolerant of pieces of the database coming and going at will, yet it all still works. So there's redundancy built in. It is also impervious to tampering by authorities. The original centralized database that Napster used for its audio file sharing was vulnerable because the authorities could stomp on the Napster hub.
Centralized.
And it was centralized. BitTorrent does use this technology that we'll talk about today, distributed hash tables and a distributed database.
So it is germane. That's good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is in use now. We know that the Tor network, which is what put us onto this topic, is using it as their own directory and index because there is no single point of failure. There's no one anyone can, any authority who wants to control it can grab in order to shut it down. And even Amazon, it turns out, uses this technology for all of their big storage. This is how Amazon stores things because they need high availability, redundancy. They're inherently multi-data center cloud-based. But what they looked at, when they looked at their needs, they said, SQL, the structured query language, SQL, is really too heavy for us. We don't need all of that kind of stuff. When you think about going to Amazon.com, a web page is being assembled from a whole bunch of different stuff, is all being pulled together onto the page. Well, it turns out that all of those the bits and pieces have tags, and somewhere there is an image, there's a blob of text, there's a this or a that you find with that tag. So a page on Amazon.com is just a list of tags, and they use a distributed hash table, distributed database in order to instantly yank that together. And, we see every time we play with Amazon that it works.
We're going to come back and talk about that in just a second. Steve Gibson is here at grc.com, distributed hash tables. Our subject, I guess you'll understand Hadoop after this as well, which is a distributed file system. I hope so. I've always wanted to know. Mary Jane Foley on Windows Weekly talks about it every week, and I don't know what the hell it is. But first, let's talk about the open cloud from Rackspace.com. If you are setting up a database, a server, if you're putting code on the web apps, you don't want to go somewhere proprietary where it's going to be impossible to move. Your data, your apps will get stuck. Run an OpenStack cloud with Rackspace. in your data center or with one of 100 OpenStack providers, and you're free. You're free. Proprietary technology is bad when it comes to this kind of thing, but OpenStack was co-founded by Rackspace, and I think it's fair to call them the open cloud company as a result. They run the world's largest open cloud, so you're not locked into a single provider. You have the freedom to move your apps, your code, your websites between multiple OpenStack-based clouds, public or private, on-premises or hosted, and my gosh, nobody does better support. Fanatical support, they call it, than the 1,400 cloud specialists at Rackspace. They can help. Try it today. Download the Open Cloud. Go to rackspace.com/open to find out more. Costs you nothing. Build what you want, an e-commerce site, a mobile app, a rich media site, test or dev development environments, SharePoint deployments, SaaS applications, corporate websites, enterprise applications, how you want on the open stack using the open cloud. And yes, if you wanted to use a Hadoop style, what do they call it? Distributed file system, distributed database, you could. Because it's open. Rackspace.com/open. Find out more. Steve Gibson at grc.com. His Twitter handle is @SGGRC. And there's some good news. For Cox, Cox customers, anyway.
Yes. Well, what I like about this, and I didn't know about this, is that Cox, which is a major cable provider around the country, it happens to be my cable modem provider and others in Southern California. They have taken proactive responsibility for blocking the universal plug-and-play port 1900. That we've talked about. We've talked about the danger of an ISP blocking it because it uses the UDP protocol, which DNS also uses. It might, if it was blocking it with sort of a heavy hand, it might also cause some DNS problems, but technically even those would be very transient if anyone even noticed the problem at all. And if users are using Cox's DNS, which was what you get when you sign up with Cox, unless, for example, you deliberately used OpenDNS or Google's DNS or override the normal DNS settings, then you wouldn't even have that problem because your DNS queries would not be attempting to leave the ISP and come back, where they might get blocked if they happen to have left from your port 1900 and they were trying to come back in to your port 1900. That's the action that a block of port 1900 would close. Someone found a page on Cox's website that shows a complete list, not of just UPnP that they're blocking, but everything. And it's sort of nice to know
that's very good to know.
Yeah. In fact, Leo, if you click that link in the show notes, you can see that they're blocking port 25 on TCP. And they show that the protocol is SMTP, of course, which we know, and they're saying they're blocking it to prevent SMTP relays, so that to prevent their customers from relaying spam if they have that.
That's very common. Most ISPs do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're blocking 80 so that because they don't want.
But that's
yep, I know.
That's inbound web traffic. So you could send a web request. And establish a conversation, but nobody can send one to you. That means you can't run a web server.
Exactly. Because when we initiate requests, clients begin issuing requests from port 1024 and upwards. Right. It technically can go all the way up to 65535, but normally it wraps around about 5,000 and for most purposes. So they are blocking inbound port 80 to prevent people from running web services because that's prone to abuse.
And it's good for business.
It's not part of your service agreement with them. Exactly.
They say you can't run a web server, so don't try. And they'll block it. Yeah.
And then they're blocking they're famously blocking the traditional problematic ports for Microsoft, 135 through 139, and they talk about that. Also 445, which was the updated Windows printer and file sharing port for Microsoft. They're also blocking the SQL port, which makes sense, 1433 and 1434, just because for some reason many things you install these days will like bring a SQL server with them because they want to use it locally, but in typical not planning ahead fashion, the SQL server advertises its services on that port, and if you were not behind a router, then that port would accept SQL queries technically from anyone in the public internet, which is really not what you probably had in mind. So it makes sense that they would block that too, basically protecting users from themselves. And then finally, port 1900, and that's, of course, the universal plug-and-play port. What's interesting is that the person who posted this or shared this, I don't remember now if it was through Twitter or on GRC's own news groups, I said, I wonder how long this has been going on. And they got back to me and said they asked a Cox person who didn't really feel like they had a definitive answer, but they said forever. So meaning at least not just in reaction to this recent report of the millions of exposed universal plug-and-play ports on the internet, but that's something that they, if we're to believe them, preemptively recognized as a problem and took care of ahead of time. So I say bravo to them, and very nice that they're publishing that. I don't know what other ISPs do or don't, but it's nice that Cox is. One thing I do know that an ISP is doing that I wish were not the case is that Comcast,
my ISP,
has recently been found to be injecting, not only injecting JavaScript into the pages that people browse to, that is there. So you go to any website through Comcast as your ISP, and when the page at Google or MSN or anything, Facebook is returned to you, Comcast is using deep packet inspection technology to inject their own JavaScript into the page from the remote site. And that's annoying, sort of just from a purist standpoint, but moreover, it's badly written JavaScript. So, for example, one of the problems that JavaScript has is it's still going through growing pains. We're seeing we're at ECMA script, which is like the formal name of JavaScript. We're aiming toward version 6, and they're adding features to mature the language. But one of the original concepts was, anybody can write JavaScript. Well, apparently anyone did. This is very poorly written. And for example, unless you take extreme measures, all the variables in JavaScript are global. So that you have to be very careful when you are mixing canned JavaScript that there isn't a collision of variable names. If there is,
so annoying.
I know. Then those various scripts that intended for these variables to be private to themselves end up sharing the value, so they're stomping all over each other. Well, this JavaScript does that. It has not been written so that it uses containment. There's a technology called closure that existing JavaScript can use, which is so complicated that it's got its own book. There's a book that O'Reilly produces on JavaScript closures. And, it's on when I really have extra time to get to it. I've used closures for my own code because I want to be careful about not doing this. There were no closures used here. So any variable names in the script that you have no control over, that the site you're visiting has no knowledge is being added to its pages it's sending to you, is potentially stomping all over the variables that they created. And it's doing other annoying things. The idea is that this is Comcast's means of informing you that when you've reached 90% of their bandwidth allocation for you for the month. So as you're going along, surfing the web, doing your stuff, at some point, hopefully very near the end of the month, up will come a pop-up on your browser from Comcast saying, notice you have exceeded 90% of your monthly bandwidth allocation.
So that's the purpose of this?
Yes.
But it doesn't happen until you've reached that, or is it happening to everybody?
No. Well, apparently it is not being injected until they need to give you the notice. They're using old code. They're using code they took from other sites whose licenses they're apparently violating.
Some moron did this.
Yes. This was really
probably a contractor. I can do that for you. No problem.
Yeah.
I can set that up.
And then while the page is there, even after you close the dialog, there are Ajax is a technology in HTML5 and beyond that allows the browser to initiate queries out to the hosting site. And you're prevented. Ajax is prevented from sending queries anywhere else for security's sake. You wouldn't want your browser to, be off, doing other things to other sites. So they've got code in there such that every page with this script starts making queries back to the host every 5 seconds. So if you're someone like me who has lots of pages open, since, if Comcast were my ISP, they're not, but were they, then every one of those pages would have had the same script redundantly loaded into it, and they would all be generating outbound queries every 5 seconds. So it's just bad.
Stupid.
It really is bad.
Gosh darn them.
Yeah. What they should do is if this is what they want to do, they ought to, at the beginning of a session where your bandwidth is exceeded, just bring up an intercept page. We're all used to that when we go to Starbucks or any, standard, like, an airport where they say your normal use is intercepted by a page that says, agree to our terms of service if you want to use our free bandwidth, and disclaimers and all that, yada, yada. And so they go, okay, yeah, that's all they would have to do. Just say, wait, stop. You're at 90%. Want to let you know. Click here for more information. Click here to lift the ban, whatever, and then use the internet in an unmolested fashion. This is a further case for encryption, HTTP, because that they cannot intercept. So this is another reason why the whole notion of the net moving to SSL/TLS all the time is a good thing. It prevents our ISP from monitoring what we're doing, seeing what's going on, and from modifying the pages that we receive on the fly. Definitely an annoying thing.
We've seen that kind of stuff before with like changing 404s into advertising and stuff like that. But this is really terrible.
Okay, now you got to go to a page, Leo, that bit.ly link that I show. I'll just say it to you, and you can click
go ahead. Okay, now you can say it. I mean, you can say it out loud if you want.
Yes, and I will. It is. I tweeted
we don't want it
to
bring down the site before I get to it. Yeah.
But for everyone who's interested, I created a shortcut to an otherwise very long URL, bit.ly/JavaAge, all lowercase, JAVAAGE. Now, Leo, the right way to look at this is, because it's a little confusing at first, is at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock is sort of the start and the end of this pie chart.
Yeah.
And so as we go clockwise from the dark side to the lighter side of the colors, we're moving back in history. It's a
pie chart of versions of Java that was created by WebSense.
Currently in use.
Yeah.
That's the key.
And the biggest pie slice is October 2009 with 9% compared to 5% of the current version. Yep. And 8.5% for the original Java 1.0.
Now, how many, there are pages tracking the days since the latest exploit. everyone, I mean, one of the things we spend an inordinate amount of time on, because unfortunately it's important, is the incredible insecurity of Java. And they are constantly producing emergency releases in order to fix the latest problem. What this says is this is a population study based on the current version loaded into the browsers on the internet. So these are the versions of Java that is accessible for exploitation. And looking at this chart again, bit.ly/JavaAge, you have to just despair, because it says that this stuff is not being updated. I mean, this is where the exploits are coming from today more than anywhere else. Back, we're on episode, 398 of Security Now. Back in the 100s, we were talking about email spam. Don't click on the links in email. And while that's certainly still true, this is all moved to the net and to these vulnerable plugins, Java, Flash, and Acrobat or Adobe Reader. And so here we're seeing the truth of the fact that old versions never die, and they absolutely should. Now, the problem is that only the new versions auto-update. So if you have an old version, it never had auto-update technology. I mean, even though arguably 2 years ago, as you said, Leo, the October 09, no, that's more than 2 years ago. That's 4 years ago. But, we've had Windows Update and automatic updates and updates. And look how many prior versions of Java there were before that. That's version 1.6.16. They started at 1.0. There were already tons of major and minor updates, yet no automatic update facility. They were in denial that, this will be the last bug. No, we found the last bug. This is 4 years ago. Oh no, this was the last bug. We don't have to update this ever again. So the problem is these Javas will never change. Unless something somehow went through and swept them. Now, I wonder how they're being invoked, because certainly Firefox and Chrome are taking responsibility. I guess IE is taking responsibility for Flash now, but I don't think it does anything to warn you about antique Java clones. Java versions in IE. And so my feeling is, since Java itself is not taking responsibility for keeping itself current before that technology was added, it's up to the hosts of the Java plugin to do so. And we really need all browsers to be proactive about this and just stop allowing these non-current versions to function. It's a trivial thing for them to do, to check the release version of the Java plugin, which is trying to run in them, and say, oh, wait a minute. And we know that Firefox does that. So, and I'm pretty sure that Chrome must be doing that too, because they've been so proactive. And as a consequence, at the moment, vulnerable version, the most recent release is 1.7.15, and we already know, and the similar release on the version 1.6 track is 1.6.41. 93.77%, almost 94% of all browsers today are vulnerable to that exploit and all the previous ones. So,
nice.
Yeah, it's just, really, 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 you want to stay away from this. Just, be very careful of Java.
Now, I have created a Bitcoin QR code that I will now flash on the screen. If anybody is so hardcore that they want to donate Bitcoin to Twit, this will go to our Twit account.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Leo.
We'll put it on the website. I'll be very curious as to, how much.
It'd be a great survey just to receive it. Yeah.
And, even if we get a couple of coins, that's some money, isn't it?
Well, but remember, they can send you .0000000.
In this QR code, you can, when you set it up, specify, I'd like 1 Bitcoin. I didn't say. Donate whatever fraction thereof. Send us a bit penny or whatever the hell
I think we're going to see hoarding going on because I'm sure not doing anything with my 50.
I ain't spending any.
I'm sitting on mine.
Yeah. I ain't spending any. So if you have Bitcoin on your smartphone, you can actually use this to send Bitcoin. I'm told. I have no idea. I couldn't find. I had created a Bitcoin in 2010. Somebody emailed me and said, "Hey, if you, I'd like to give you a Bitcoin. I wish I'd taken it now. If you have a Bitcoin email address." And I said, "What's Bitcoin?" So I set up a Bitcoin. I was even doing some mining. I wasn't as lucky as you. Now it's not even worth doing it, right? You'd have to set up such a high-end machine. But I couldn't find that old address. Now the key on this, right, is to back it up because that's your wallet and that's it. If this hard drive crashed and I had a bunch of Bitcoin in it, I'm in deep doo-doo.
Yes. Yes. It's purely bits.
It's just
purely
bits.
Electronic.
Okay, so as soon as I have any coin in my wallet, I guess I should back up the number, whatever this is. I don't even know what this is.
When we lose our checkbook, it's okay because the bank is actually still holding our money.
There ain't no bank.
Not the case.
No bank here. Sorry.
So no, this is good.
Yeah.
So something disturbing.
I'm gonna get a yabba dabba doo. So every time a Bitcoin is donated, a yabba dabba doo.
I'll send you my WAV file.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So something disturbing is going on with Apache. It was first seen last summer, August of 2012, and it's becoming prevalent and now worrisome. There have been several security researchers who've been following this. And for example, there was an infection of the LA Times, which we briefly mentioned last month, February. Seagate's media site, media.seagate.com, got infected last month in March. The symptom is that iframes, which are I for inline frames, are being conditionally injected into the pages being served by these infected Apache servers. Every server that has been found that's been infected is running version of Apache, version 2.2.2 or later. So that's one common factor. The disturbing thing is no one knows how these Apache servers are being infected, but more than 2,000 servers have been. And those 2,000 servers are hosting, because many of them are hosting multiple sites, virtual sites, they are hosting more than 20,000 websites. So 20,000 websites hosted by 2,000 web servers, and these numbers, of course, are rough, and it's difficult to find these. I'll explain why in a second, are infected. And what's making this so difficult for investigators is what has been found in infected servers is a malicious Apache module. So one module, Apache is inherently module. In the HTTP config file, you have a whole batch of load module statements, which when the Apache service starts up, it reads the file to figure out what it's supposed to be doing, how it's supposed to be acting as a server, and it sucks in all of these different modules, PHP and so forth, for offering the services that it needs. One of these modules is malicious on these servers, and it's in the so-called Apache pipeline, which is the term they use for the request processing. The idea being that a module in the request pipeline is able to do anything it wants with every request made to the server. So, and it has all the request headers that it's able to see. So what the developers of this module have done is they have given it knowledge to thwart analysis. It will never inject the malicious iframe into the IP of any known security researcher. So security researchers can't scan the net. They can't go to suspected sites. When they go there, the site looks fine. Somebody else goes there from a different IP, and it's not fine. But way more than that. They look at the user agent, which, remember, in the request headers is the claim that the browser makes about its heritage. You know, is it Safari? Is it Firefox? Is it IE? And so forth. So they're only selecting, currently, they're only targeting specific operating systems, because one of the things in the user agent is typically this is the browser I am and this is the OS I'm running on. They're only targeting Windows for these particular attacks. Now, again, the infected server could be running and is typically running on Linux sites or on Linux OS, hosting Apache, which is then hosting either one to hundreds of websites. But for example, they blacklist search engine spiders. So the search engines won't pick up the iframe. Again, that, as we've talked about before, that's been a very clever means of finding problems. Remember, for example, that webcams were being indexed. So you could just do a search and find all the webcams because they all had a particular user agent in their reply. And so anyone who was spidering the net and collecting user agent strings could say, oh, here's all the webcams that you can log on to remotely without a password. But nope, these guys don't do that. They deliberately don't inject this iframe for search engines. They also use cookies to manage return visitors. And they look at the referrer header. Remember, the referrer is tells a website where this query came from, where the user was when they clicked on something. And so, for example, if you received the URL of a suspect site, if you were a researcher, and say that you were using different IPs because, you know, on the theory that maybe it's IP sensitive, which it is, but so you were going to go to a different IP so that wouldn't catch it. And you enter the URL into the address bar. Well, there's no referrer, so it'll be blank. And this thing is smart enough not to inject. It only injects if it knows that the link that on a given search engine is valid for this site, and that means you're probably clicking the link, although it's spoofable, but still it's another level of filter. So you can see that what we have, and this is why this has been sort of pernicious and persistent and slowly growing over time. What it does, the iframe refers people's browsers to additional malicious content, so that are on otherwise valid sites. So other sites are infected with the actual malware that that's going to infect your browser. This whole system I've been talking about is the way of getting you essentially to visit a site you're not really visiting. So if a bad site were infected, it's like, okay, if people go there, they'll get infected. But if they don't go there, they won't. Instead, other good sites, 20,000 of them, are now injecting an iframe which induces your browser to go to the bad site to get itself infected. And so this is sort of a sort of a second-order delivery system for that. One of the things that's also been found on these on these compromised Apache servers is that the SSH daemon, the secure shell service, has been compromised. A backdoor has been installed in every one of these machines that has been seen that allows remote attackers to access the machine bypassing the regular authentication. Thus, that's why you would want a compromised secure shell, so that you don't need to log on with real username and password and whatever other credentials. But it does much more than that. It captures any valid credentials which are used to log on and sends them off to a repository somewhere, so that the attackers, having once compromised this machine, then get the valid credentials. And what's often the case is that the same credentials are used on many different systems by common admins. So this gives them a dictionary of username and passwords to try elsewhere to get in. And so this thing tends to spread. So they're monitoring anyone's login. That is admin login, and if anyone uses that login somewhere else. Oh, and I guess the other thing that happens is it's often the case that someone will log into the system and then will secure shell from there to another system. And that they capture as well. So they're able to monitor anyone using a compromised system to access and administer another not yet compromised system, in the process getting access to it, which is the way, again, the way this tends to spread. So it is daunting. It's known to be going on with Apache systems. There are a couple researchers who have been tracking it. There's a great blog called unmaskparasites.com, and Dennis, who runs that site at Unmask Parasites, has a blog, and he wrote of this. He said, while this hack is not new, I could not find reliable information about how hackers break into servers and get root access. The malicious modules are owned by root, and httpd.conf files can only be modified by root. So that tells him for sure that somehow someone's getting root on these servers. He says, at this point, I can say that it doesn't look like a security issue of some control panel. Remember, we've seen that in the past. He said the two infected sites I worked with had different control panels, virtual min on one and cpanel on another. He says the malicious module doesn't come from Linux repositories, so that's not how it's getting into these machines. He said, so someone somehow breaks into servers with root permissions, which is quite alarming. One of the servers had only one user. It was a dedicated server, used strong passwords, didn't allow remote root logins, used custom ports, and failed to ban to prevent brute force attack. Nonetheless, it was hacked within 1 month, and its administrator could not find signs of the intrusion in log files, only legitimate logins. And he says, of course, root access gives you the ability to remove most possible traces. So we'll keep our eye on this. People running Apache version 2.2.2 and older may want to check out unmaskparasites.com. There's much more there that's more specific to administering the site. He gives a lot of scripts and specific things you can do to verify that the modules your system is currently using have not been modified and that no additional unknown ones have been added. And it would certainly seem to be something worth doing, because at this point, it looks like there is an unknown means for root access somehow gaining root access to servers. And the people who are taking advantage of this are being so careful not to let this get found, because they recognize this is the golden goose for them, and they don't want it to get loose and be closed. So it looks like someone's taking very careful advantage of a currently unknown means of compromising Linux servers running this version of Apache. We don't know if it's through Linux or through Apache, and through where, but we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, that's how our servers got hacked, was not through Drupal, but through modules, older modules that had been installed on top of the Drupal. It's hard to keep track. You had all these modules doing things, and so you don't just have to watch, your main code base, but all these little modules that are in there.
Yeah, have you looked at how quickly any apps in iOS get old?
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel
they're updated all the
punished.
time. Yeah,
I'm being punished now for having played with so many of them. It's like, oh, you've got 56 updates. It's like,
you
oh,
got to do it every day. Hey, I was running the Bitcoin QT software, which is kind of the default.
That's the one.
Yeah, kind of basic software. And I was going into the settings, and I noticed this: map port using UPnP, and that's checked by default. Now, it seems to be connecting, so maybe you don't have to. Maybe it doesn't need a special port, but I thought that was kind of interesting.
Anything that wants to be part of a network, and Bitcoin needs to communicate with many other nodes in order to update itself, to bring itself current with the current hash history. And then, the idea is that when it succeeds in minting a coin, it sends that news out, and it requires that other nodes confirm that it found the hash. And so it's that communal agreement that runs the whole system. So you cannot be a Bitcoin miner on an island.
And offline, yeah.
You've got to be part of the network, and you're also, when someone says, "Hey, I got one," it's like, oh crap, okay, let me see, and
now what do I do, right? Yeah, but we did get, apparently somebody in the chat room has given us, at least I haven't received it yet. Our first Bitcoin has appeared, apparently, in the wallet. So.
And that sounds like the right file. Very, very familiar to me.
So there you go. Apparently, I don't need UPnP unless I'm getting incoming connections. I don't know what that means, but I'm making outbound connections, obviously, to the Bitcoin servers. So
good.
That's all well and good. And I've encrypted my wallet, and I'm backing it up. I wish it said where the wallet was stored, at least on the Mac. That's not immediately obvious. I'll have to dig around, because I'd like to put the wallet on a Dropbox, and then I wouldn't have to back it up, right? As long as it's encrypted, having it on a Dropbox would mean it's on a bunch of machines. It'd be pretty safe that way.
Yes, and in fact, I know that on Windows it's under app data, slash Bitcoin and then it's like slash wallet, and it's a collection of files that.
Can I double click? It'd be nice if I could double click the wallet and have start the Bitcoin that way, and then that way I could start it from any location. I'll play around with it.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's nice, isn't it?
It's real.
I'm already $50. What is it? No, more than $100 richer. Of course, I can't do anything with it.
Wow.
Well, somebody gave me a Bitcoin. That's 100. Nice. What is it? $113. Nice. Very generous.
I'll give you a podcast instead.
You have 50 Bitcoins. You could. We are going to put the Bitcoin address, which is just a long crypto number, and the QR code to make it easier for you, so you don't have to enter it by hand, on our website if you want to donate Bitcoins. Thank you. And I thank you to, now I forgot his name. It's Dark Haven or something like that for our first Bitcoin.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I have an announcement.
Uh-oh. Are you getting married?
No. Oh, Leo.
Having a baby? Okay.
Who's laughing in the background? Somebody who probably is going to have a baby.
Maybe. It's our newlyweds in the room from Wisconsin.
So GRC is announcing today a new service.
Wow, you are prolific all of a sudden.
I've been cranking away, baby. I referred to this once, and it is now up and public. grc.com/fingerprints. It's under the main menu, under services, because it's a new service from GRC. This is the thing that I talked about a few months ago. It took me literally until yesterday to get it all nailed down, working perfectly. This allows people to detect when somebody is intercepting their SSL, their TLS, their HTTPS connections. And I'm really proud of it. It will be here forever. Of course, it's free, like everything here at GRC. And I think it will end up probably over time becoming popular. The idea is that if you are in a corporation that is secretly decrypting your SSL traffic and you're connecting to the corporate server, and then it's decrypting your traffic and then inspecting it, filtering it, logging it, whatever, and then it's connecting to the secure service that you think you're connecting to. It's spoofing the certificate that you receive. Well, it is impossible, thank goodness, to perfectly spoof a certificate from a remote server, because the certificate contains, as we know, the remote server's public key. And the public key matches the private key, and the private key is secret. So nobody knows, for example, Google's private key. Believe me, they're not letting anybody find that out, because that would be the end of the world. So that means that the authentic certificate from Google contains the public key, which we use for encrypting data to Google. But a certificate which is spoofing Google, pretending to be Google, has to be offering us a public key that it says is from Google. But it can't be the same public key as Google's, because we don't know, because the person spoofing doesn't know Google's private key. So that means that it is impossible for a certificate to have the same hash. And so what all browsers allow you to do is to view the details of the certificate you have from a site. For example, if you're looking at grc.com, that page, grc.com/fingerprints, will only allow itself to be displayed over secure connection. And so you can always right-click on it and do the view certificate. And all browsers, and on that page I give instructions for all the different popular browsers, step by step. Here's where you can find the data, although the browsers don't hide it. Normally it's right there, and it says thumbprint or fingerprint. And it's a series of 20 hex characters, which is the hash that the browser just made of the certificate. The certificate contains other internal hashes for their own purposes, but this is the hash of the certificate that the browser calculated to say this is the fingerprint of the certificate. No one's ever really done anything with this before until now. So the idea is GRC will make a connection for you. I display a set of 11 different server certificates, just sort of, the popular ones, Twitter and Facebook and WordPress and Tumblr and so forth, just sort of as a reference. But so the idea is that GRC servers are right on the internet backbone. Level 3 as a tier 1 provider, nobody is filtering my connection. So I create the connections and get the security certificates from those servers, or you can also enter your own custom one, whatever particular one you may care about, like your bank. And so I will show you the authentic fingerprint of the real certificate, and then you simply compare it with the one your browser shows you for the same site. And if they're the same, you absolutely know, that there is no interception going on. And if they're different, then you need to be careful and maybe worry a little bit, because if you didn't know this was happening, then it raises some flags. So I expect this to be a long-running and very useful service. Anyone, anywhere can instantly get from me using this page the authentic fingerprint of any site they wish, and then compare it easily with the fingerprint that their browser shows them for the same site. And if there's been a man-in-the-middle attack, whether malicious or corporate or educational or your church or whatever organization, this is happening more and more because, as we've talked about, more and more sites are using SSL all the time for the sake of privacy and security, but that's making people uncomfortable. That is, people who want to monitor and filter your traffic. There's even a reference that gives you a sense for this on that page. I found a blog posting a couple of months ago from one of the companies that is doing this offering this service as an appliance, where they say that they've just now removed the LGBT filtering checkbox from their user interface in reaction to people complaining, apparently, that they were explicitly offering LGBT filtering and tracking of people using their service. No, I'm not kidding. It's bad, Leo.
That's
yeah. And also a dialogue there from the Microsoft product, which is a forefront threat gateway, they call it, which makes it very clear that they're inspecting, as they call it. They're inspecting your HTTPS traffic.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, little inspection. So,
enabling inspection may have legal implications. You should verify if using this protection is in compliance with your corporate policy. Good Lord. Jeez.
So we've needed a way to quickly check to see if this is happening to us, and GRC offers that now. So I'm really glad I did that.
Really
and this came from the mailbag, by the way. I referred to this way back when somebody wrote, one of our listeners said, "Hey, Steve, is this possible?" And it's like, oh, that's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah.
And, it's taken me quite a while, but it's done. So it's there and always will be. Also, just a little update. The second most recent service offered was the addition of the universal plug-and-play probe to Shields Up. And when I looked this morning, we were at 4,060 routers identified. So it continues creeping up as more and more people find it.
4,061 now.
Ah, good.
One more, not mine.
Yeah.
One more.
Also some news. We have a new Firefox. When I saw this yesterday, I went over and did under Help and then About, and that kind of kicks it into action. It says, oh, you want to know about version? And I was on 19.0.2, and asking it about itself started it downloading a 10.3 megabyte replacement, which it then updated. Now I'm on version 20. We have a couple new things that people will care about and a lot of little other things. We have something new for Firefox, which is convenient, is per window private browsing. So under the File menu, there's the new tab to give you, obviously you want to open another tab. There's new window, and then there's new private window. So you are now able to just leave your existing session up and running. You don't have to shut down and restart to go for the whole browser to go into privacy mode, and that anything you do in that window is not recorded. And there's a cute little purple Mardi Gras mask that appears in the upper right-hand corner of the window when that's the one that you're in, just to say, yep, you're in, we're protecting you. Nothing gets written to the disk, no cookies saved, no history saved, and so forth. So that's convenient. There's also, they've updated the download manager so that's got a better user interface, a better experience, as they say. And they have furthered their technology to prevent plugins from being able to hang the browser. I haven't had that happen for me in Firefox for quite a while. It used to happen. It was annoying. But now plugins can be expressly individually closed without needing to recycle the entire browser. Then there's the regular security fixes, performance improvements. They've added some more things to ECMA Script 6. So they're moving their support for that forward. There's a new JavaScript profiler for people who want to improve performance. And I got a kick out of this. They've added a new HTML5 feature. Get User Media is the name. And it implements web access to the user's microphone and camera.
Oh, wow.
What could go wrong with that?
A la Flash. Interesting. Well, but, you know, that's probably maybe WebRTC or something like that.
Yes, yeah. They're moving toward being able to host, real-time, like chat.
Right. You can do that with WebRTC right now through Google. So, yeah, that's interesting.
Right. Yeah, so that'll be a good thing. I mean, again, I'm bullish, as I mentioned when I was talking last week about the asem.js work that they're doing that allows them to get very high-performance JavaScript without breaking compatibility. I mean, I'm bullish about the browser as the future. This is the cloud access platform. So these are all good things they're doing. And
I have to say, when it's open source, I have a little more confidence than when it's closed source written by Adobe. At least somebody's looking at that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it can fix it quickly.
And can fix it, exactly.
And when I was, after upgrading, I saw a notification that I hadn't, maybe I'd seen it before, but I hadn't mentioned it. And that is, along the bottom, it said, Firefox automatically sends some data to Mozilla so that we can improve your experience. And then over on the far right was a button that says, choose what I share. And so I thought, okay, let's see what that is. So I clicked that. And all that did was open up the standard options dialog under the advanced category and the data choices tab. So anybody can see that anytime you want by going to the option, the options dialog in Firefox, advanced category, data choices tab. And there are two things there. There's telemetry, which was not checked, which I respect. I'm glad they didn't. It says, shares performance, usage, hardware, and customization data about your browser with Mozilla to help us make Firefox better. And I turned it on because it's like, I want them to know I'm running with 85 tabs so they can think, oh, crap,
there's somebody doing that.
we got to handle these people.
We got an outlier here.
We got to make that scrollable. And then the second one was Crash Reporter, which was turned on by default, where Firefox submits crash reports to help Mozilla make your browser more stable and secure. And that was on, and I left it on. So those things are there. Our prolific animator has continued animating old episodes, old but not, not dusty, still useful.
They're all good still. This is an archive of brilliance.
Yeah. So askmrwizard.com or askmrwizard.com/securitynow. Bob Bozen is running that show over there, and he's added episode 11, that is Security Now episode 11, on bad Wi-Fi security, and that's in 5 animated video segments. Episode 13, WPA, Wi-Fi security done right, in 2 video segments. And episode 14, VPN theory, and he's only got the first of several segments complete so far. But he's moving ahead.
That's awesome.
Doing
That's great.
Animated video to supplement the podcast audio.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Wonderful.
I think that's really great. And I wanted to just check back in. There's been a lot of activity on Mark Thompson and company's, I was calling it Shmush.
Yes,
and
they corrected us. Smoosh. It's a Smooshbox. Yes.
I didn't want to be smooching it, so I guess Smush.
It's a Smooshbox.
Smooshbox.
By the way, I ordered one,
Yes, and Mark saw and was pleased. And I don't think he'd heard the podcast at that point, but he has since. In fact, he sent out a notice to all Kickstarter.
They're so close. 15 days. They're just 3,500 away from their goal.
Yeah, so they got 16,4 something, right?
Yeah, 16,446 out of 20,000 they want to raise. So we're getting closer to the Smooshbox.
Frankly, I don't think this is not a do or die thing. It's not like they're not going to make it if they don't get as many.
Don't say that.
Okay.
Don't say that. All the Smoosh Kit early backers are gone now. There's still 35 of the $250 later backers available.
And now that's significant because I got some feedback from our listeners. Several people sent me links to services. And so it's worth mentioning there are definitely services. There's actually many that allow you to Yes, the line allow you to sign up. But what happened is Mark and for his purposes, we're using a service that sold the phone numbers.
Right.
And so Mark said, okay, clearly this doesn't work.
Yeah, you want to run your own service.
And that's the point is, yes. And I've looked at pricing, and they, of course, it's like, it's like, for a while, I thought, oh, look, I could put my website, give it to Amazon. And it's like, oh, no. When you start doing the math, it's not feasible because they want to make money. And, of course, these services want to make money. They're having to pay something on the back end, so they're marking it up. Now, one person sent me a link to hardware that their company uses. Multitech has something called the SF Sam Fox -100G, and it is essentially what this box does. So Multitech has it called the SF100G. I thought, oh, let's go look. So Beach Audio has it for $388.46. Gemini Computers at $374. PLC Center for $451. I don't think they're going to sell many of those at that price. And eBay sold one just 2 months ago, middle of February on the 19th, for $390. So there does exist something that looks like this. I have no idea in detail how it compares to what Mark and his group are putting together, but we're getting it for more than $100 less than the best price here when we get it for $250. So I'm glad these guys have done something, and I think it'll be a long-term win for them. And I'm excited to play with this thing.
That's really cool. Yeah, I am too. What we're going to, just so people understand, what I'm planning on doing, and I've already talked to my web team, and they seem to think it's doable, is set up a checklist when, just like you would subscribe to a newsletter, but you could subscribe to text messages. When Leo is in the building, the podcast could be beginning any minute now. The podcast actually began.
I need that, yeah.
The podcast is done, and the podcast is produced and available for download, that kind of thing.
I love the idea of getting texted when it has been posted online. Yeah. That's great.
So I'm trying to think now that there are 25 shows. There's probably 2 texts per show, started recording and has available for download, and maybe one more on my shows where the pre-show has begun. So let's say 3. That's 75 different possibilities. It's already way out of control.
Yeah, so it's 25 lines and 3 columns.
Yeah, that's what. Well, we'll put it on each individual page. So if you go to twit.tv/SN, there'll be a checkbox that says "Send me a text." Now I promise, we will not harvest the phone numbers. I don't want your cell phone number. I don't want just thinking cell phone number. So and because we're doing it ourselves, we can make that promise. Nobody's going to see that number, except T-Mobile. I guess you have to use them as a service. And then I guess if 1,000, 2,000. I don't know how many we might be sending out. What if 20,000 people say we want to know when Security Now's out? We'll be sending 20,000 text messages.
That's a flat rate, $25 a month with T-Mobile. So
I think it's cool.
I think it's very cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we might have some emergency messages that when my salad has disappeared, things like that people could.
Or if you have a power failure at,
Well, there you go. But then the Smooshbox will also be dead. So that's not going to
happen. Yeah.
We'll figure it
out.
Put
it on a UPS. Put it on a UPS.
We'll take some votes.
See, that's the other cool thing is that if you use a service and your network connectivity goes down, you're screwed.
Right.
Not if you use a Smooshbox.
Right.
Because it doesn't use a third-party outside provider. It is its own SMS texting provider.
Actually, we put that on a UPS, and unless T-Mobile's towers are down, and they're just right out the side of the door here, we might be, even with a power outage, able to send a text out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're still here.
It doesn't receive texts in any way.
Yes, bidirectional. Yeah, so you can do all kinds of things. You can have contests. You can have special events. You can have text this code to this. Yes, yes.
Ooh, that's intriguing.
I'm going to use it to turn on my air conditioning.
Oh, I can't wait till Smooshbox. Well, I hope it looks like they might make it. They're only halfway through, and they're almost all the way funded, so that's good.
Yeah, all we need to do is spread the word, because we want people who could use this to know about it. That's that's the thing that's annoying about Kickstarter, is when you show up too late. It's like, can't, I wish I knew about this.
You know, it's funny. They're painting a beautiful mural on the side of the building over here. And they had a Kickstarter project to raise the money for it. I didn't even know about it. Petaluma's largest mural. Here we are across the street. Didn't even know about it. I would have publicized it. Didn't even know about it.
Yeah. I did found a really fun, just this completely off topic, but Think Geek on Monday, the special day for us all.
Oh, yes.
Finally it's not Monday, so we can actually believe something that we see.
The worst day on the internet. I hate April Fools.
I know.
Hate it.
So they were offering something so cool, a $49 Play-Doh 3D printer.
Well, I used to have one of those when I was a kid. You push the lever and it extrudes the Play-Doh.
Well, this thing, and that's, I'm sure, was the inspiration. I tweeted the link to it. If you look in my Twitter stream, you go to, what is it, bit.ly/SGGRC. And that will find the link that I posted. I shared it on Monday because it was so well done. It showed you the machine takes 2 D cells, or maybe it was C cells. It's got a little crank, and it shows you like it's printing a droid. So it's a 3D printer, absolutely convincing looking.
That's so cute.
And it runs. Oh, and you hook it to an iPad. So your iPad is and there's free download software.
By the way,
your iPad.
Steve, this is almost certainly an April Fool's joke.
No, Leo, no, I got one on order.
Really?
Yeah,
it's actually from the Play-Doh folks. No, this is no, it's a joke.
Click the buy it button. Tell me you want one, because don't tell me you don't.
I want one. Continue on, Steve. I also want the, look at this. Bear Paint Conductive Paint Kits. That's cool. The Moving Hand Muscle Wire Moving Hand Kit. The Auto Bacon T-shirt. There's so many great things on here.
Yeah, they're good guys.
Think Geek. Love them.
So, because it had a science fiction basis.
Yes.
I went with Jenny on Friday to see The Host.
Is this a movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, kind of.
Yeah.
It was so bad, Leo.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, terrible, huh?
I've never put a review up on IMDb until now.
That bad.
It was that bad. And, yeah. So, and I'm just warning our listeners. I care about you all.
Don't go see it, huh?
Do not see it.
Here's one review that says it wasn't awful.
Keep reading. Scroll down a little bit longer.
This movie is unimaginably awful. Save your money. Steve Gibson from the United States writes. It was that bad. Did you walk out?
No, Jenny kept offering that we could walk out. I was a little uncomfortable, feeling that maybe if other people were actually enjoying it, they would think, well, why don't those two just leave? Because we were groaning so much. Oh, gosh. It was just, the special effects were okay, but the director wrote the screen, did the screenwriting, which is never a good idea. And so... It's
from Stephanie Meyer, the author of the Twilight Saga.
Yeah.
Choose to believe, choose to fight, choose to love. Yeah.
I think that was, yeah. So anyway, don't go.
Don't go.
And Leo, boy, have we got stuff coming. We're going to have a wonderful summer. And I have a guilty pleasure that I will probably afflict myself with on Friday, which is the next installment of the Evil Dead movies. That Evil Dead.
Do you love those? I've never seen any of them.
Oh gosh, yes. That's why I said
watch those.
It's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
You probably ought to watch them. It's a cult win. They are really funny. They're gory, but with a serious tongue in cheek. Like Army of Darkness. Did you not see Army of Darkness?
No.
Oh, Leo. Okay.
Does that involve zombies? Because I'm not a fan.
No. Well, it wasn't zombies. But it's really it's campy, tongue in cheek, over the top. And Sam Raimi was the producer. Bruce Campbell
I love
starred
Sam
in all.
Raimi. He's wonderful.
And Bruce Campbell starred in all 3 of the first ones. He's not in this one.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing it. It was, back in the 80s, so this will be a much updated, better, newer and so forth. But anyway, we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
And finally, a nice note on a serious note. From Philip Cook, who wrote, "A week ago, I started my day with a blue screen of death. Not the way you want to start your week. Advising that I had an unmountable boot volume.
Oh, dear.
Efforts by a Dell tech only led him to the conclusion that we should reformat the drive and lose all my data. Nothing would recognize the drive, and all the check disk commands in the book could not even see it or result in anything but the same blue screen on every reboot, no matter how I started. A Mac Store utility that I ran from a downloaded file advised me to return the drive for a replacement. After getting estimates ranging from $400 to $2,700 to recover my data, and trying numerous other tricks, he has in quotes, recommended by online chats, etc., I was fortunate to come across SpinRite. At first, the glowing testimonials seemed just too good to be true, and I will admit that I thought they may have even been fake. Of course, he doesn't know me very well, but that's fair enough. He said, so I invested the $89 and downloaded the file and fired it up. At first, I thought that it was going nowhere, because after 4 hours, it still said 2% complete. I figured I would leave it running over the weekend, and imagine my surprise when I came in this morning, saw the message that it had completed. It booted up, ran check disk, and then started Windows. All I can say is, wow.
Woohoo!
Thank you for taking the time to create this program. It's bad enough losing data, but I also saved the hours it would have taken to recreate my desktop, links, etc. Needless to say, I am impressed.
And image that drive right now, Philip.
Thank you,
Immediately. The check disk is superfluous after you run SpinRite, right? It's kind of a poor man's SpinRite.
Yeah, well, it's something that Windows often kicks you into when it's like thinking, wow, we just recovered from something. Let's see if everything's okay.
But if you've passed
sort of a perfunctory.
If you've passed the SpinRite test, there's nothing additional needed. But Windows will make you do it, of course. Hey, before you get into our topic of the day, distributed hash tables, I want to tell you, actually, you were talking about sci-fi. There's a new book, audible.com. Audible's, of course, a sponsor of the show, so let me make sure you know this is an ad. Audible is the audio bookstore we love so very, very much. 100,000 books there. I've been a member for 13 years now. And
you have? I didn't know that.
Since 2000,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I have over 500 books in my library. That's one of the nice things about Audible. Your books are always yours, forever and ever. So you can, especially with the Audible app, which is so pretty, you can, on an iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, Windows 8, they have a Metro version. You can always see what's in your library and read it. But this is the new one I'm going to add. Thanks to a computer error, New Yorker Tom Carmody wins the main prize of the Intergalactic Sweepstakes. Tom claims his prize before the error is discovered and is allowed to keep it. However, since Tom is a human from Earth without galactic status and no space traveling experience, he has no homing instinct that can guide him back to Earth once his odyssey begins, and the galactic lottery organizers cannot transport him home. Meanwhile, his removal from Earth has caused a predatory entity to spring into existence, one that pursues and aims to destroy him. Carmody is on the run and ends up transporting from Earth to Earth different phases and realities of the planet, which, of course, is not the time or condition he expects. It's called Dimension of Miracles. It's a comedy sci-fi novel, very much in the tradition of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Right.
It was a discovery. Neil Gaiman discovered it. It was written, I think, in the 60s. Neil Gaiman discovered this. It's part of the Neil Gaiman Presents series at Audible. He is one of my favorite kind of dark fantasy novelists. Love his stuff. And they asked him to pick some great unknown novels. This is the first one, narrated by John Hodgman. Actually, it's not the first one. I think there's others. Yeah, let me play a little bit of it.
It had been a typically unsatisfactory day. Carmody had gone to the office, flirted mildly with Miss Gibbon, disagreed respectfully with Mr. Wainbach, and spent 15 minutes with Mr. Blackwell discussing the outlook for the football giants.
So I can't wait to read this. But anyway, you can get this for free, but there's many, many choices, of course. Sci-fi, yes, a very good selection. But also, I read a lot of nonfiction. That's where that End of Money book I've been reading comes from, is audible.com. That's a really good book if you want to know more about money in general, Bitcoin specifically. There's classics, there's thrillers, there's sexy stuff. The new sexy one, 50 Shades of Dorian Gray. I don't know what this is going to be like. I'm going to play a little bit of this. It's Oscar Wilde meets 50 Shades.
The studio was filled with the rich odor of roses, and when the light summer wind stirred amid the trees of the garden, there came through the open door the heavy scent of lilac.
I probably shouldn't listen to any more of this. It is both hot and funny, according to Fred Armisen of Saturday Night Live. Audible.com. So here's the deal. If you go to audible.com/ let me see what the code is for us. Security Now. I'm sorry, audiblepodcasts.com/ security now. You can sign up for the gold account. The first month's free. The first book is free. Cancel in the first 30 days. You'll pay nothing, but the book is yours to keep forever, as with all audiobooks. This looks good. The Battle of Bretton Woods. John Maynard Keynes, Harry Dexter White, and the Making of a New World Order. Part economics, part history, all real. I can't wait. I mean, this is the big problem I have with Audible. If you look at my library, there's so many books in here, and I can't wait. The new Antares Dawn, as you mentioned, all of the Michael McCollum stuff.
That recently,
yep,
yes,
that's on. I just downloaded that.
You need to listen to that.
So many. The Peter F. Hamilton Great North Road is on my list.
Ooh.
I had just finished the second book of the Patrick Rothfuss King Killer Chronicles trilogy. So many great books. Anyway, add a book, listen to it, tell you. This is a way to find out if you like audio. I think you will, but it's worth trying. Audible.com. I'm sorry, audiblepodcast.com / security now. And in honor of the release of Dimension of Miracles, Audible's doing a sweepstakes. You know, the hero of the Dimension of Miracles won a sweepstakes. We're not going to transport you off the planet Earth, but we will transport you to Comic-Con, October 2013 in New York City. So here's the deal. Go to audible.com / sweeps, and you can enter to win in the drawing of this chance to win a trip for two to New York City. It includes round-trip airfare, a 4-night stay, and 2 4-day passes to New York Comic-Con. A trip for two to New York could be yours. You've got to enter. All you have to do is enter your email. That's it. And you have till April 12th to do it. You don't have to be an Audible member to do it. Just enter your email, and you're done. Audible.com / sweeps to get in the sweepstakes. I just entered it, but I probably shouldn't have, because if I win, I'm going to have to give it back. But I guess I won't win. And and if you want to get a free book, audiblepodcast.com / security now. We do thank Audible for our support of their support of Security Now. All right, time to talk hash table distributed, not just hash tables, distributed hash tables.
Yeah, and again, I'm unhappy with the label that this has received, because it sounds uninteresting. Distributed hash tables is like, well, okay. I mean, it's not even accurate, because the hash tables are not distributed. The hashing is the way you access or you index a distributed database. So you'll see they're called distributed hash tables. We're calling them that because that's what you'll hear in the future. This is a technology which is part of the internet culture now. We referred to it when we were talking about Tor. As we know, BitTorrent uses it in order to create a database in the cloud. It's the way that peer-to-peer networks, and also networks that aren't concerned about a central authority shutting them down, which is one of the reasons people switch to a peer-to-peer model, but where, for example, in Amazon's case, they have something called Dynamo. Dynamo is their own proprietary database technology based on distributed hash table technology. Okay, so what does a hash have to do with a database? What we know about hashes is that you can put anything into a hash function, and what you get out is a fixed length, pseudo-random pattern of bits, is probably the best way to characterize it. We have talked, for example, in some cloud storage instances of, for example, hashing the contents of a file to create a key which would be then used to encrypt it. And what's clever about that is then the file provides its own key, and only somebody else who has the identical file could hash that to get the identical key. And then that's the way, for example, a shared hosting, a shared cloud storage system could receive files that are encrypted that it has no knowledge how to decrypt. Anyway, so that's an example. But the other thing you can do is you could take the name of an object and hash it and get a key, essentially. And so that's what distributed hash tables do, is they use a hash as it's also sometimes called a mixing function. They just to sort of mix the thing up into this random value. Now, in the case of BitTorrent, you're wanting to identify files in a big database that various BitTorrent clients have. In Amazon's case, they're wanting to, they've got a massive website with incredible number of images and blobs of text and user reviews. And I mean, just look at how complex a page on Amazon is. Those are not pages that are created by some individual. They're all dynamically generated by software, and they're all pulled together from individual bits. So Amazon uses their distributed hash table-based database in order to hold all of this. And I've read their white paper on Dynamo front to back, and their biggest concern is latency. They absolutely know that they have to present a page fast, period, no matter what. They've really gone out of their way to keep the latency of the delivery of their pages down. Other applications of distributed hash tables may have different goals. They may want much more redundancy. So, for example, in a BitTorrent model, you have highly variable availability of this collective database as individuals on a whim come and go. In Amazon's case, they have got fixed servers, and they want to be able to take a server down and have nothing, and have all of its data become unavailable, but have the whole system continue to function. And if a server fails, even if it's a non-scheduled downing of the server, they want to be able to similarly have there be no effect. But in general, because it's them in a data center that's cooled and it's got power and everything, they don't expect, unexpected events at the same rate as, for example, BitTorrent's individual nodes coming and going from the collective net. So the common concept here is that you use whatever tag it is to identify an object. It might be one of those wacky-looking GUID, globally unique ID, GUID strings. It might just be the natural name of the file. Whatever it is, you put it through a hash function in order to get the result. Now, Amazon uses MD5 because for them it's good enough. Now notice, this is not an instance where the security of MD5 is a problem. This is somewhere where actually the speed of MD5 is a benefit, and the fact that it gives you 128 bits output is sufficient. If you, for some reason, you had an application where you needed more than that, SHA-1 gives you 160 bits, and SHA-256 gives you, 256 bits. So the goal, regardless of what hash you use, is you're going to get out this string of bits. And the idea is that, and this is the key, we understand, listeners of the podcast will get it, that the point is every time you put the same string in, you get the same pseudo-random pattern of bits out. So that's the key. The hash table, or the hash, it maps the input string into a pseudo-random output, and it does it fairly. And fairness is the key. That is that the nature of a cryptographic hash is that if just one bit of the input changes, if in the name you changed this from red pixel, you changed it to red pixels, or you made a tiny change, every bit that you change on average inverts 50% of the output hash's bits. So it is extremely sensitive to modification. And the idea is that the hashing function, which is good, evenly distributes the results over the whole space. If we were using, for example, MD5 like Amazon has, 128 bits is 340 billion combinations. And the point is, you obviously you're never going to have 340 billion servers to choose among, but you're going to divide this large number somehow into the actual nodes in the network which contain pieces of your database. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the idea is that the hash function doesn't discriminate. It's not going to choose some values over others, and that's what makes it a good cryptographic hash, and not something that someone whipped up in their basement thinking, oh, this is a really good function. These are high quality functions that guarantee an even distribution of results. So how do we turn this long bit string of ones and zeros into a selector of a node? It's interesting, and this sort of harkens back to the oddness of the way the internet works, where we've talked about how the genius of the internet is that packets don't necessarily always get where they're going the first time, but the internet layers redundancy on top of that in order to solve the problem. Similarly, the designers of the distributed hashing index approach said, well, okay, if nodes are coming and going, then we don't know how many we're going to have at any given time. So how do we divide the total key space, that is the number of possible key outputs from the hash, into the number of nodes? Because that's going to change. And also, if we use the key to index, to point to a node, then if we add nodes, how do we rebalance everything? I mean, these are difficult problems when it comes to going from sort of the overall glossy, oh, look, let's use a hash, to fairly and distribute storage responsibility across a number of nodes. It's if you knew, for example, that you always had 16 nodes. So you had 16 nodes. Well, you just use the low 4 bits of the hash. It's that easy, because 4 bits can have any of 16 values, 0 through 15. And so you use the 4 bits, the low 4 bits of the hash, to choose the node, and problem solved. Except, what if there's 17 nodes? Now you've got a problem, because you were using 4 bits, and that only gives you access to 16 nodes, but you've got another node you'd like to use it somehow. So what they decided is sort of bizarre. The designers of these systems divide the the total key space, the total space of the hash, which, for example, in MD5 is 128 bits. They may just choose, okay, say 32 bits out of that 128. We know that 32 bits gives us 4.3 billion combinations. So they then segment that into sort of ranges, some arbitrary number of ranges, again, way more than they actually have nodes. And then they randomly, and this is the part that's a little, creates some cognitive dissonance, they randomly assign these ranges to nodes so that when a key is put through the hash, it results in a value that randomly that chooses a node where the data will be stored, but that node has been chosen in a random fashion. The way this happens is, imagine a clock where the end connects to the beginning, like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 12 wraps around into 1. So we have a circle or a ring, and the values of the output values of the hash function essentially form a ring from all the bits are 0, that like at 12 o'clock, and increasing value as we go around this clock face until we get to midnight or back around to 0, which is all 1 bits. So you can see how it's possible to map the values coming out of the hash into locations in a circle. So the nodes choose some number of locations at random on the circle. And the number of locations chosen is a function of sort of as I was mentioning before, BitTorrent would use a different sort of strategy than Amazon's Dynamo, but it might be, 100. So just say 100, and then the number doesn't matter either. So each node chooses 100 locations at random around this circle, where the circle is indexed by the output of the hash. And the way the logic works, because the spots on the circle that the nodes chose will almost certainly not correspond to keys that come out of the hash, because we're dealing with 340 billion possible keys. So the idea is, when we want to look up which node contains the data, we run the name of the file we're wanting to look up through the hash and get out this 128-bit value, which identifies a location on the circle. We then go clockwise until we find the first node the first node that chose that spot, the clockwise from where we started spot on the circle. That's the node that we ask for the data. And that gives, so that's sort of the primary owner of the data. Redundancy comes from allowing some number of nodes in succeeding locations of that circle to carry copies. So if we ask that first node and don't get a response from it, then we move again clockwise to the next spot on the circle that a node chose, and it will have a copy of the data from the previous node. So what this has done, quacky as it is, it works, is this allows us
This should be the motto of this show. Wacky as it is, it works.
Wacky as it is, it works. So nodes appear, and they say, hi there, I want to participate in this wacky shared database. So I'm going to choose 100 spots at random. Now, their responsibility is to begin carrying the data from the 4 upstream nodes, right? So because all of the 4 upstream nodes are going to be relying on that node as successive levels of backup. So a node appears and it says, okay, here I am. Oh, and there's a metadata communication in the network. There's actually a protocol called gossip, which is how the nodes talk. They gossip among themselves, not in a big hurry, because there's so much resilience and redundance in the system that it is not important if the news of nodes coming and going doesn't propagate instantly. It's all kind of very relaxed. So a new node comes in and says, hi there, here's the 100 spots I've chosen, everybody. So everybody update your knowledge of me, and I'm going to go start copying, replicating data from the 4 nodes that are counterclockwise upstream of me. And so this node goes and asks the other guys for their data. And again, it's not in a hurry. It's redundant. So it would like to get the data, and it will in time and hopefully long enough to be of use. And so the idea then is that clients, wherever they may be, who want to access the data in this database, they ask any one of these nodes, very much like a Tor node. Tor nodes would be typical distributed database nodes. They ask any of these nodes for the data. That node that's been gossiping with the other nodes has a maybe up to date, maybe it's a little out of date, it doesn't really matter, but it's got sort of the latest news in the gossip circle. It hashes the key, uses its own most recent copy of the gossip news to identify where on the ring this would be, and that tells it which node is primary storage for the data. It then asks that node for the data, saying, hey, here's a key. Do you have the actual data corresponding to this key? And if so, send it to this guy. And if that node says, nope, I don't have it, then we know that there are redundant copies. Oh, and if the node doesn't answer at all, if it just disappeared off the network, it's like, oh, okay, that begins to propagate the news through the gossip channels. Meanwhile, we know that there are other nodes that have it. And so what ends up happening is, with this very sort of lazy, relaxed, gossipy protocol, the data survives as individual nodes in this network come and go over time. It's duplicated. It's redundant. Anybody can be asked for any data, and they more or less enough know how to find it. And it's crazy, it's wacky, but it works.
Node roulette.
That's how distributed hash tables and the databases behind them function. It's a little unsettling for someone who likes to, absolutely know where something is located. But the advantage is there, chunks of this can just disappear. And it doesn't matter. The whole thing continues. There's no single point of failure. And it can be, it can be tuned for speed. It can be tuned for resilience. It can be tuned for redundancy, whatever characteristics your particular application has. And if you look at the Wikipedia article on distributed hash tables, there's a bunch of projects. Apache has a project that is doing this, and Freenet, I think it is based on this. And so it is a technology of the internet. I imagine we'll be talking about it in the future. And of course, Bitcoin is the same thing. Bitcoin is a distributed network of individual miners. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to be a miner to love Bitcoin. And now that we can accept Bitcoin donations, I love it too. Yeah. So, Steve Gibson, there you go. Distributed hash tables. It's all clear as mud, and I hope everybody understood that. And if you didn't, well, you know what? You can listen to it again. You could even read it because we've got text transcriptions of the show and 16 kilobit audio available at Steve's site, grc.com. We have on-demand audio and video, higher quality of both, available at our site, twit.tv/SN. And if you go to grc.com, do check out SpinRite, world's best hard drive maintenance and recovery utility. Check out the new fingerprints feature. Check out Shields Up. Make sure your router is safe. All of that stuff. Everything's free except SpinRite. That's his bread and butter. So support Steve because he does such a great job every week on this show. We really are grateful to you, Steve. And if you go to grc.com/feedback, you can ask questions. Steve will be doing a Q&A episode. Security willing next week. Hackers willing next week. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Leo.
A lot of fun. We'll see you next time on Security Now.
Security Now.